Ladies and gentlemen, the brutality and the carnage that Collin Griffith unloaded on his mom on September 8th of 2024 is as real as it gets. First, I'd like to thank you for not only being here, but for your attention. When you came to jury selection, you had no idea what type of case you might encounter. Would it be a petty theft, a DUI? But what you ultimately heard and sat on was a first-degree murder case with a second count of kidnapping. So to hear and see what you had to go through is not something that jurors see every day, and most certainly most people never think about or see. But you've heard and seen the evidence, and later this morning and into the afternoon, you will be doing what you came here to do. And that is to dispense the ultimate form of justice. Not because I'm asking you to do this or suggesting you do this, but based upon the facts and the evidence, the defendant sits there, a guilty person who stabbed his own mother in the neck and then watched her bleed out in front of him. The lady that brought him into this world here on earth, he took out of this world and this earth. But see, at the end of this, he has to watch you come back through those doors. And he has to stand and he has to listen to the verdict. And that verdict is out of my control. It's out of their control. It is 100% in your control. And I have faith and confidence based upon what you heard and saw that you will do the right thing and you will hold him accountable for the fury he unleashed on his mom. Because the cold hard facts and the reality is quite unthinkable when you really think about it. The reality of what that person did to his mom is a second-by-second nightmare for her. She left this world knowing that the person that took her out was the son that she gave everything to. When you're in the quietness and the privacy of the jury room, I want you to take a close look at that knife. And remember, each inch that knife went flying through Cathy Griffith's neck, through each part of her human anatomy that Dr. Graveran described. Because the reality of it, there isn't just a defendant and a victim and this happened and that happened, but the reality of it, for what the defendants accomplished, which is exactly what he wanted to do for so long. The writing was on the wall, ladies and gentlemen. The writing was on the wall. The defendant knew what he wanted to do, and it was just a matter of time. Why? Why did he have such deep-seated hatred for his mom? The lady that was just concerned about him making it to Domino's to work his 4 o'clock shift on Sunday. That's all that she wanted. They can say whatever they want about Cathy Griffith. It's all right. I'm not afraid. You shouldn't be afraid either. Because on Sunday, September 8th, Cathy Griffith did no harm, meant no harm to her son, Collin Griffith. She had one objective only, that cost her her life. And I don't know if it's sad or if it's admirable, but she knew and was willing to die and knew she would die at the hands of her son just to spend some more time with him. We heard from Detective Lacey Zenoniani that Cathy Griffith literally said she knew she would die, but as long as it meant that she could spend some more time with her son, it was worth it to her. And what thanks did Cathy Griffith get from her son? What thanks did she get? She got a foot-long butcher knife rammed into her neck. And you heard the pathway of destruction. Feeling everything through her neck, through those neck muscles, through the esophagus, through the trachea, through the cartilage, and on and on and on, as it ripped through her neck, and the shock and pain going through her body as the defendant was happy. As he followed through with what he said he would do. If nothing else, he's a man of his word. He said he would kill his mom, and he took her out. But you know what? Now he's in a court of law. Now he has to suffer whatever comes his way in the form of a verdict. And that verdict is guilty. That's guilty for what he did to his mom. As she's on the floor trying to get up, but she can't get up. She's got a gaping, open wound in her neck, compliments of her son. Thanks, Collin Griffith. Appreciate that. Cathy, who was literally dusting off his domino shoes, doing his laundry, buying him Starbucks, taking him to the movies, buying him things, getting him a phone, a computer. Now, yes, these are things that you would hope a mom would do. But not all moms do that. Whatever issues Cathy had, she didn't lack for love of her son. She wasn't there to do him harm on September 8th. Her motives were quite simple. Her motives were for Collin Griffith to return to her household by 10 a.m. Sunday. That's all she wanted. She wanted her son, who she was dusting off his domino shoes and making sure that he had a clean uniform, to be home in time to go to work. That's all she wanted. The clock was ticking. Once he turned 18, she knew he was gone. He wanted nothing to do with her. He had told her flat out he wanted to kill her. He had attacked her before. He had already killed somebody in Oklahoma. And she knew what was going to happen to her. But despite that, all that she wanted was every single minute she could have with her son. Well, she got to spend the last seconds of her life with her son as he watched down, as she gushed blood out of her open, gaping wound. The death was not instantaneous. She bled internally. She bled externally. She was fighting to get up. You see her arm finally comes underneath the island. And there comes a certain point, ladies and gentlemen, where that last drop of blood came out of her, where she took her last breath, and she died and left this earth knowing that her son butchered her. And that's the reality of it. You take a look at that knife, and you'll know what it went through, who it went through, who was holding it, what their intention was, and what they wanted to do. Operation Kill Mom accomplished. That's exactly what Collin Griffith did. There's a little PowerPoint here for some things to look at, for you to remember when you deliberate. September 8th, 2024, Cathy Griffith was murdered by Collin Griffith. That's as simple as it gets. But going back the year earlier, the first person the defendant killed before he killed Cathy Griffith, he killed that person when he shot that person 2 times with a handgun. Once in the chest and once in the head. Now you'll remember the importance of that as we continue on. You'll recall when they downloaded the defendant's phone and they saw something on September 8th that Cathy texted Collin. Now, Collin Griffith didn't need a reason or an excuse to be mad at his mom. You've heard through so many witnesses, law enforcement, countless witnesses, that the defendant explicitly verbalized that he would kill his mom. Not only that, but he thought about different ways to accomplish that. And a reoccurring theme was that he would stab her. you don't have to guess what he was thinking or what he wanted to do. You heard from multiple law enforcement officers the defendant's statements about that he would kill his mom. And when they asked how, he gave a plethora of ways, including throwing her out of a car, shooting her. But stabbing her was a reoccurring theme. For whatever reason, the defendant got off on that. And you will recall that the defendant's anger towards his mom, it was already overbrimming. But his anger was just intensified when on Sunday, September 8th, the last day of Cathy's life, she wrote the following to Collin. Mind you, her only intention, despite all these threats that she didn't want to have to carry through with, was to get the defendant home. That's it. But she wrote to him, Collin, the recordings of you admitting to killing, and then she wrote the person's name, and planning the murder, there are 4 different instances from my Ring camera, are all going to Bob, Susie, Amanda, and Chris at 3 p.m. today. Plus the recovered audio from Chuck's iCloud, where you told your dad you hated me and I was an evil bitch, are being sent too. Let's stop for a minute. The defendant called and thinks his mom was an evil bitch. That has just so much malice and hatred, once again, to the lady that was trying to do everything she could. I mean, God, we saw Ring videos. She's cleaning all the time. She's doing laundry. She makes sure that his house is stocked with food. She has clean clothes for him. He has his own room. He has his own Xbox, computers, cell phone. She's giving him the credit card to go to Starbucks to buy sandwiches and drinks, taking him to the movies. Anything and everything to make him happy. And you know what kind of thanks she got. Thanks to Collin Griffith, stand-up guy that he is. And then what did she expect from him? Did she expect for him to be remodeling the house or doing all this work? No. She wanted minimal things. She wanted respect as any mother deserved. She wanted the defendant to pick up a damn finger and do some chores, to weed whack the backyard. Was it 10 acres of property that she wanted him to go outside in the 90-degree weather and push a lawnmower? No. It was a nice, modest backyard that she wanted the defendant to take care of some business, like the man he was supposed to turn into. But if it interfered, God forbid, with him playing video games or him taking his walk, then piss on his mom. That was his attitude. It's 100% his attitude. He didn't want to be bothered. She wanted him to put up a bookshelf. The defendant didn't want to do it. She wanted him to clean up the room because there were a bunch of ants and cockroaches that were crawling around Collin Griffith's candy bags, but it might interfere with him getting some fresh air. So he just blew her off. Day after day, time after time, the defendant wanted to do nothing but what he wanted to do. And you know what? Life would go on if that was the worst of his ways. But he also had that hatred. So every time his mom would ask him to do something reasonable, that hatred would brim. He has told you what he thinks of his mom, that she is an evil bitch. This is what he's saying about his own mom who brought him into this world, his own flesh and blood, and that's what he thinks of her. Cathy continues on. My dad is sending me his recordings of you telling him how you planned my murder back in February. Audio, video, email, texts, and phone records are all being sent. So we continue on with the PowerPoint. This is the last day of Cathy Griffith's life. The defendant's life would go on, but Cathy Griffith would cease to exist here on this earth. And there she is on Sunday, unsuspecting the violence that would be coming her way from her son. It should have been just another Sunday afternoon. Should she have not gone over there? Should Collin have gone somewhere else? You know, these questions really don't matter because the reality is what happened. She said there are 2 things that are going to happen. He's either going to come home with me or he can follow in his own car. She didn't say, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to smoke him, I'm going to beat his ass, I'm going to stab him, I'm going to shoot him, I'm going to do any of that stuff. She wanted to go over there and bring him back. She didn't even want to have to go drive 2.5 hours over there. It would have been real simple if the defendant just came home. But once again, that's beside the point, because the reality is he didn't come home, he didn't want to come home. That's the way life is sometimes. But she wanted to accomplish one thing, to have the defendant come home, not to do him harm, and she did nothing to him. No violence, no threats, nothing. That was it. She even told her mom, one of the last conversations was when she got over there, if he refused to come, then she would call the police. So there's Cathy, wearing the exact clothes that she changed into that she would die in. She was a big fan of coffee. The shirt she was wearing said something about coffee or die, kind of like the motto, live free or die. So there's Cathy, unsuspecting of what would happen a few short hours later. With her black t-shirt and her jean shorts and her black Under Armour flip-flops that she would be killed in. She picked up her Kate Spade bag, purse, backpack, put it over her shoulder. Interestingly enough, if you call one of the ladies, I don't recall if it was Miss Bell or Miss Jones, but they said when she pulled up and when she got out of the car that she threw her bag over her shoulder and she went up to the house, which is exactly how it appears that she carried her bag. The same bag, ladies and gentlemen, that she was holding when the defendant attacked her and stabbed her in the neck, the same bag that got blood all over it, holding her bag over her shoulder, and her keys and everything else that fell on the ground when the defendant attacked her. Does that sound like a lady who's attacking the defendant with their bag over their shoulder, holding their car keys and their charger? Of course not, because it didn't happen that way. And then this was it. You all remember when the door closed. In retrospect, it's quite eerie. The door closes. Cathy never returned to that house. That house that she kept immaculately clean. Cathy went off with her bag over her shoulder. A stocked fridge, stocked snacks, clean. Doesn't look like there's a thing out of place. Keeping a clean, safe, loving environment for Collin. Did Cathy have issues? She did. But she's a human being. You heard about her history and what she had to endure. Did that mean she should be stabbed and left to bleed out by her own son? Of course not. That's why he needs to be held responsible. So, this fancy overhead picture. What is the importance of this? Well, now I'm going to talk a little bit about the jury instructions. I'm not going to go into a bunch of jury instructions. You're going to hear those. They're very important. They're long, but I'm going to hit you with two quick things. The first degree murder and the kidnapping. I want you to look at this picture here. This is where Collin Griffith murdered his mom with premeditation and intent. This is where Collin Griffith stabbed his mom and killed her. You see the mulch. You see the entryway. You see the carport. Now you'll recall that Miss Sally Bell, the lady getting ready for church, lived right here. Nancy Jones lived here. Nancy Jones had a more obstructed view just because of the sheer angle of it. This corner here of Susan Detman's house prevented her from actually seeing what was going on. But she did see the defendant reach out, grab Cathy, and pull her in. Now, Sally Bell had a much clearer view. Sally Bell, time is important, okay? Time is important. You guys like a good timeline, and you have a pretty good timeline. Sally Bell goes to church religiously, no pun intended. She gets ready, she leaves roughly a little before 5 o'clock. Every Sunday, her and her husband get ready, they go to church. The defendant wasn't going to church on Sunday, he was getting ready to murder his mom. So Sally Bell, she sees the defendant after Cathy comes over, and is Cathy mad? Is she happy? Of course she's not happy. That doesn't mean she's being violent, and she wasn't violent. She was moving her hands. Sally made it clear. It wasn't threatening or violent or physical. She was animated, moving her hands as she was talking. And she wanted her son to come home. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. So Sally saw and heard, and it was loud enough because she was inside looking out a front window. She saw the defendant grab his own mom. Remember, this isn't a stranger, which would be bad enough. He grabbed his own mom by the hair. He thinks she's an evil bitch. He wants to kill her. He's told people he's going to kill her. He's battered her and attacked her before on November 14th in Port Charlotte. And now he's just doing the same thing again. And his mom paid the price. But you know what? He's going to pay the price when you come back with a guilty verdict. He is going to pay the price because of your verdict. And he grabbed his mom by the hair, and she said, stop, you're hurting me, let go. This is his mom begging and pleading for her own son to stop pulling her hair. Who does that? He does that, and he did it. So what happens? Who's doing violence to who? I ask you that. Who is being violent to who? The mom is not being violent in any way, shape, or form to her son. She is doing nothing to him. Nothing to him. But good old Collin Griffith grabs his mom and he yanks her, he pulls her, he drags her. Who cares what verb you want to use? The point of the story is that he pulled her and dragged her into the house. She didn't have a choice because her hair was being pulled and her head and her body was being dragged into the house. Why did the defendant do that? Because he was about to unleash and quench his bloodlust for his mom. He was going to accomplish what he wanted to do for whatever it was, weeks, months, a year. And his bloodlust was going to be quenched at the price and at the cost of his mom and her dignity and her life. So why did he bring her inside? Well, it's quite clear why he brought her inside: to unleash additional violence on her. He wanted to isolate her. He didn't want witnesses to what he was about to do. Okay? That was roughly around 5 o'clock. Now, I want to tell you something. The 911 call was at 6:14, okay? That is an hour and 15 minutes. I'm going to tell you something. They weren't talking or hanging out for an hour and 15 minutes. Quite the contrary. This was a powder keg that was exploding. This was a powder keg that was exploding. What was he doing for that hour and 15 minutes after he killed his mom? Connect the dots, do the math. But as soon as he pulled her inside, it was just the continuation of the beginning of the end. So for kidnapping, I'm going to start with count 2. Count 2, kidnapping. This is what I have to prove. 3 elements. Collin Griffith forcibly or secretly or by threat confined or abducted or imprisoned Cathy Griffith against her will. That's exactly what he did. He forcibly grabbed her by the hair and pulled her inside against her will. Did she enjoy that? Did she walk into that house voluntarily when Collin dragged her inside? When, as she said in one of the videos, when he already beat her ass on a number of occasions? No. Quite the contrary. He forcibly did those things against her will. So now Cathy knows what's going to happen. Maybe she doesn't know she's about to get killed, but she knows the violence that's about to happen. Because now the defendant has her all alone with no eyes to see, no neighbors to help, and he has her all alone. He's a lot bigger than her. He's a lot stronger than her. He weighs a lot more. He's younger than her. And she was alone. Now, this is no stranger to her. She shouldn't have had to have been afraid of her own son, but now the reality is he's dragged her in by the hair. She's begging for him to let go, but does he care? No. And he amps it up even more. He yanks her and pulls her so hard that, as we recall, in the mulch here is one of her AirPods. Boom. They go inside. She would, you know what? She never came out of that house again alive. She came out dead. Dead, with no blood in her body. Thanks to Collin Griffith. This is the last time that she would enter any place. And this is the pathway to further destruction. This is literally the trail to her death at the hands and the knife of Collin Griffith. He yanked her by the hair. She didn't stand a chance. He dragged her, pulled her, get out of the source, use whatever words you want to use, and he brought her, boom, through the living room. Her other AirPod falls out. This is the violence and the force that the defendant's doing. Not only that, she loses her AirPod case. And we know where this is headed. We know the path that this is headed. That house is immaculate. Susan Detman keeps an immaculate house. That is a fact. That is evidence. Susan Detman keeps an immaculate house. Cathy Griffith, her daughter, keeps an immaculate house. There's no signs of a long fight. Cathy Griffith was in no position or no desire to fight. And the defendant had all the power, all the sick, twisted power, all the strength, all the size to his short, defenseless, unarmed mom. Does that sound like a fair fight? Or does that sound cowardly and violent? Well, that's what kept going on. There he is. That is the face of Collin Griffith after he murdered his mom. Those are the eyes that looked at his mom as he shoved that knife so deep in her neck that it literally came out the other side of her neck. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Collin Griffith. Collin Griffith dragged his mom over there. Collin Griffith, in his mind, now we're moving on, well, I suppose before we move on to the premeditation part, I told you there were 3 elements of kidnapping. We've already hit the first one. Second one, Collin Griffith had no lawful authority to do so. Of course he had no lawful authority to do so. You don't have lawful authority to batter somebody, to grab them by the hair against their will and yank them into a house so you can abuse them and violate them and destroy them more. Element 2 is proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And third, Collin Griffith acted with intent to inflict bodily harm upon or to terrorize Catherine Griffith or to commit or facilitate the commission of any murder. That's a lot of words, but you'll take your time when you have the jury instructions. What did Collin Griffith do? He acted with the intent to harm Cathy Griffith, to physically destroy Cathy Griffith, to terrorize Cathy Griffith, and to kill Cathy Griffith. That third element's proved every which way possible. Because of that, ladies and gentlemen, the defendant is guilty of kidnapping. So when you deliberate and when you talk about the evidence and the law, and when you discuss amongst yourselves, and when you do the analysis, I submit to you that I have proven through the evidence that the defendant is guilty of kidnapping. But only if it could end there. Only if it could end there. Life would have gone on for Cathy Griffith. But it couldn't end there. Because of the defendant's conscious decisions. Because of his actions, it couldn't end there. Life could have gone on, but it didn't for Catherine Griffith. Because of what the defendant wanted to accomplish. And what he didn't stop doing until he had accomplished it. And then I had to figure out, dang, what do I do now? But you get to see and hear everything that happened next. So we move on to first degree murder. That, once again, these aren't abstract concepts. This is the reality. That defendant reached into the butcher block and pulled out a knife. It probably made that sound when that metal comes out of the wooden butcher block. Well, Cathy didn't have her AirPods in, so she can hear crystal clear. And that knife comes sliding out of that butcher block. And Cathy would have known at that point that what the defendant had told her, what the defendant had told law enforcement, that he would kill her and stab her, that's how it was going to end for her. So the reality is the defendant pulled a knife. Picture doesn't quite do it justice. I'm not going to stand up here and hold the knife because you're going to look at it in the privacy and solitude of the jury room, and you're going to look at that knife and you're going to see firsthand where that knife has been and who put it there. So Cathy gets stabbed in the neck with such force. You know the pathway. You know everything that happened. You heard from Dr. Garavan, who was very detailed about his expertise, how many countless stabbing cases he's worked. Never has it been an accident or somebody falling on a knife. The force that knife took, the things that it cut through, the open, gaping wound, her bleeding out till the last drop is gone. So, back on September 8th, 2024, after Cathy struggled to get up, struggled to do whatever somebody who's just about to die tries to do, knowing that their son just ensured their death. Mind you, this was at about 5 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen, because that's when Sally Bell saw the defendant yank his mom in by the hair. 5 o'clock. Yet it takes an hour and 14 minutes for the defendant to call 911? Yeah, it did. You're going to hear two clips. One is just the very intro. It establishes the time. It establishes the first words out of the defendant's mouth. Then you're going to hear the defendant's contradictory, absurd attempt at blaming Cathy Griffith for this. For first-degree murder, I have to prove three things. Catherine Griffith is dead. That's an understatement. Number two, the death was caused by the criminal act of Collin Griffith. It was a homicide by Collin Griffith, stabbing his mom in the neck and watching her and letting her and being happy that she bled out and died. And three, there was a premeditated killing of Catherine Griffith. Ladies and gentlemen, when the defendant dragged her inside and dragged her to the back of the house to the kitchen, when he reached for the knife, when he pulled the knife out, think about it. Any step of the way, he could have thought to himself, you know what? This is messed up. I shouldn't be doing this. I can't be doing this. Yeah, I want to kill her, but this is my mom. You know what? Dang, I'm going to stop. I'm not going to do this. He had time to reflect. But his reflection was it Collin 1 or Collin 2? We'll get to that a little later. But his reflection was, yeah, I am going to kill, I am going to stab this evil bitch. And that's not me saying it. That's the defendant's own words. He showed his intentions by his actions and by his words. and what he said he was going to do. He was going to kill that evil bitch, his own mom. And so he did. So Cathy Griffith is laid out on the floor, has taken her last breath, has bled out her last drop of blood. Catherine Griffith has been murdered by Collin Griffith. The crime is over. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. Now, not to complicate things, but there's another way that I can prove first-degree murder, and I submit to you I've proved it both ways. It's my burden, of course, to prove the crimes beyond a reasonable doubt, but there's two different ways that I can prove first-degree murder. Both end with the same result, which is guilty of first-degree murder. The other way, that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but it's called first-degree felony murder. I've already shown you, ladies and gentlemen, why the defendant is guilty of premeditated first-degree murder and why the defendant is guilty of kidnapping. So when you go back and deliberate and when you fill out the verdict form, while it might not be easy and nothing is ever happy about sitting on a murder trial, but you'll know that you did the right thing based upon the evidence and based upon justice. So the defendant's guilty of first-degree murder, premeditated, and kidnapping. Another way that a prosecutor can prove first-degree murder is first-degree felony murder. And I'm going to tell you this first, little insight. In order to convict the defendant of first-degree felony murder, it is not necessary for the state to prove that Collin Griffith had a premeditated design or intent to kill. When you run through the three elements, Catherine Griffith is dead. That's number one. Number two, while engaged in the commission of a kidnapping, Collin Griffith caused the death of Catherine Griffith. And three, Collin Griffith was the person who actually killed Collin Griffith. Her own flesh and blood brutalized her. We'll go to the 911 call, probably an hour or so after he had already murdered his mom.
18:14:11 seconds, September 8, 2024.
911, what's your gasoline emergency?
Hampton, Florida. I don't know the fucking. I don't know the secret.
Now, clip two. What I want you to notice about clip two, ladies and gentlemen, is that the 911 operator asks a very clear, simple question. Listen, what caused the bleeding? And you're going to hear and see, and you probably remember, that the defendant didn't respond for many, many seconds, maybe 6 seconds, he didn't respond. And the 911 operator said more emphatically, listen, what caused the bleeding? And then the defendant gave two diametrically opposed different explanations. Because he wasn't going to tell the truth about what happened. And he was certainly going to try to escape from the charges and blame his mom when he is the person that murdered his own mom. So the first thing he says is, she got into a fight. What do you mean she got into a fight? Like he's trying to distance himself from what actually happened. She got into a fight and she lunged at me with a knife and she fell on it. So that's his first explanation. He's painting a picture that his mom lunged at him with a knife, tripped, and somehow fell on the knife. That's preposterous. Not being disrespectful, but that's preposterous when you think about common sense and you think about physics and when you think about reality. That just didn't happen. The evidence is to the contrary, but that's his first statement, that she lunged at him with this knife and tripped and she somehow falls on the knife. That didn't happen. Then the 911 operator says, where is the knife right now and who did she get in a fight with? And then the defendant says something completely different. Because it's not the truth. Truth doesn't change. The truth is that the defendant stabbed his mom right in the neck, and then it ripped through and came out the other side. That's reality of what happened. And then the defendant changes his story. He thinks he's helping himself by elaborating or trying to prove to himself what happened or prove to others. And then he changes his story. Instead of her lunging at him and falling on the knife, now he says, she came at me and we got into a fight for a long time. Then she got on top of me and fell on it. Twisted it back, whatever that means.
So listen, what caused the bleeding? Listen, what caused the bleeding?
She got real tight and we went to the knife and she fell on it.
Where's the knife right now? And who did she get in a fight with?
We came at me and we got real tight for a long time. Then she got on top of me and fell on it. This is back.
Collin Griffith murdered his mom, ladies and gentlemen. This is a picture of Cathy Griffith with the person that murdered her son. This is a picture of Cathy Griffith alive and smiling and happy next to the same person that she knew was going to kill her. Yet she was willing to suffer and pay the ultimate price, that was her life, at the hands of her son in order to spend a little more time with him before she left this earth. So that person, Cathy Griffith, live, full of life, smiling and happy, turned into this person. Bleeding out on her mom's kitchen floor with her good old son standing by to watch her bleed out. And there's her Kate Spade backpack purse that was over her shoulder. Once again, you saw it over her shoulder in the video. You also heard from Nancy Jones that when Cathy went up to the house, she had her bag over her shoulder. And that bag got drenched in blood as it literally spurted out of the huge gaping hole in her neck, compliments of her son. When fire rescue shows up and law enforcement shows up, they say they can literally see through her neck. They can see into the organs in her neck. And that is the end result of Collin Griffith's hatred and violence towards his mom. A gaping hole from that knife. And we saw that as she's getting stabbed, she doesn't stand a chance. She comes out of her Under Armour flip-flops. Her keys crash to the ground. Her purse crashes to the ground, falling off of her shoulder. Her charging cords fall to the ground. She struggles to get up. You can see things she's grabbing onto.